Town of Leicester. It's the National Space, is it Museum? Space Center here in Leicester, and I'm with Keith. Some of you may remember last year, this gentleman has the distinction of being the first person I ever did a meet and greet with last year in Coventry.
It was quite an experience.
It was great. We went to Warwick Castle.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
That was quite awesome, and we kind of spent a good part of the day together. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, so here we are a year later, and you mentioned this last year, but the calendar was pretty full. So
yeah, we just fitted in what we could, and yeah, it's just nice to meet up with you. If we can do it at a venue, then it makes it that bit more interesting. Interesting, I didn't realise this had been up since 1998.
Yeah, quite a while now, actually.
25 years I've never visited it, and yet it's only 15 miles down the road.
Wow, that's pretty close then. It's interesting because you think of the Kennedy Space Center and it would have so much you could see and do, and maybe even the Johnson Space Center, but they're kind of just like this.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go to the Kennedy Space Center, going out to the launch pad, that's not something the average tourist gets to do.
Yeah.
Now, I've been able to do it because as a serving military member, part of what we did is we went down to Cape Canaveral on a program that I was involved in. And so we got to see the things the general public doesn't get to see. Went out to the launch pad and went into facilities and such. But most people just get to go into a facility that's like this, that's made for tourists.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I'm not trying to diminish what's here, but when you think of the space program, you think of the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah.
But you could come here in Leicester and get as good or very similar experiences as you would get there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you won't have noticed on your little screen then, but as we were just talking, behind Chris, we had a whole class of school children. And in the coach park at the moment, it's 10 or 15 coaches there. And what I see this as being is purely something to engage young people in space exploration, science.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the gift shop would indicate that, since most of the stuff to buy is for little kids. I did get a lapel
pin. A fair bit.
Well, I bought lapel pins and a fridge magnet, but there wasn't much else there.
Yeah.
No, it's very much for school kids. That's the intent, and that's good to inspire them to get involved in science, astronomy, physics. I mean, you and I sat in and watched the movie, which was narrated by David Tennant, Doctor Who. That was pretty cool. That was an interesting movie. It was nice for me. It wasn't quite the same as my experience as a kid. I went to a planetarium when I was a kid that we just talked about the stars, and they would show the stars. So the whole thing was about stars. This was more, I don't know, kind of like an advertisement for get involved in science. Yeah,
I think they were utilizing the planetarium space for a very good three-dimensional sort of imagery that, you know, it's your whole vision of view.
Yeah.
But as Chris says, it's just interesting facts and some connection with people. He kept going back to this, you know, what questions were people asking themselves, and then trying to give them some answers. And it did focus a little bit on the new space telescope. They didn't tell us what the name of the orbit is that it's now in. Do you remember? I can't remember the name.
They took James Webb.
Yeah,
the Lagrange.
The Lagrange orbit. It's like a Lagrange point.
Yeah, they went to Lagrange point. That's
which is a fascinating concept. That you can be between two bodies, and then you're stuck in that orbital space. You're not rotating around either.
No, you're not orbiting either. So
you're just held in that location.
Well, that was interesting, and it's nice that they also talked about CERN and Large Hadron Collider. And really, that was interesting. So it really, like I said, was kind of an introduction to, I mean, not just kids, it was mostly adults who were sitting there when we were in there, but an introduction to get involved in science, astronomy, and those things. Can you guys hear us okay? I think you can because the microphone. Doctor Who. Yeah, David Tennant was one of my favorite Doctor Who's, the modern Doctor Who's. Chris Eccleston was good to get it restarted. David Tennant was awesome. After that, I had some, Peter Capaldi was good, but I've had some issues with some of the newer Doctor Who's. Like that. Are you a Doctor Who fan?
I used to be very into Doctor Who, if only that it would scare us witless. Because what they'd do is they would use the normal environment that people would be in, and then the Cybermen would be coming out the drain.
Or the Daleks.
So you knew that any drain could have a Cyberman coming out of it. I mean, that was terrifying as a child, you know. But yeah, it was. The storylines were always fun.
Yeah.
and entertaining.
Okay, so classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, the classic one.
Do you have a favorite?
I think probably Baker, one of the really old ones.
As a
that
kid,
was my genre.
as a kid, the young adult Tom Baker was my favorite Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But as an adult,
when you're
seasoned
looking
adult,
at the concept.
Patrick Troughton was my favorite. Doctor
Patrick?
Who. Yeah, Patrick Troughton, the second one. The little short guy with the dark hair.
I can't even remember what he looked
Well,
like.
the sad part about Patrick Troughton is that the BBC, the idiots that they are, erased all the tapes to reuse the tapes because they were cheap bastards. So most of his shows don't exist. They were wiped out. I'm dead serious. A lot of them that have been saved is because they had shipped the film to Australia and Hong Kong, and the engineers in Hong Kong didn't record over them for whatever reason, thankfully. Otherwise, we'd have not like the 2 minute Cybermen.
We did the same with a lot of the films when they were done in proper films. They would stick them in a storeroom somewhere that was in no way humidity control.
Well, and part of the problem too is that
they all got wrecked.
the earlier films were done on a material that degrades quickly over time. The cellulite or not, whatever it is.
They've had to be vacuum sealed.
So there's been massive effort to restore and save those old talkies and the silent film era and a lot of the early films. Now, with Patrick Troughton, some of the film is missing, but some of the episodes are there for some of the storylines. So they've animated it because they have the audio still, the audio tapes, and they put the audio to the animation. It's not the same, but he became my favorite of the classic Doctor. I still like Tom Baker's amazing. And he's still alive. He's the last of the classic Doctor Who's, and he's the only one still alive from that time era. But the second time around, I think that David Tennant is my favorite.
Yeah, I think these days they're exploring the concepts far more than just being a situational program. The whole concept of being able to travel.
In 1963, it was kind of a big deal to travel back in time to the Aztecs. That doesn't get the audience today. You got to have alternate realities and the end of time.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So when it started, this whole idea of having a situation that people didn't really think had any concept of existence. They thought they might get to the moon, but all that kind of thing was done before this space travel, any understanding of space at all. And so to be right at the beginning of that, it was a very interesting concept to bring to people's consciousness. And I think much like space does, not Space Trek, what's it called? Star Trek.
Star Trek, sure.
And the space films.
All the science fiction stuff.
Those ones are the ones that you see them when you're 10, 12, 15. You get into science and technology, and then you're creating the mobile phones that they used to use in Star Trek.
Beam me up, Scott. Oh man, the kids are coming. They're coming in the exit. There's so many of them. There's hundreds of them.
Yeah, we've got 100 kids now.
It was over 100. Plus, there's another school.
You should really zoom it round. They just have no idea.
Well, I will in a second show people. I can't wait to the camera. Here we go. There we go. Oops, got the lens cover on. There we go. School kids flying in here left and right. Put it back. Yeah. Anyway, so over our heads is a Gemini capsule. The Gemini TOW test vehicle, as they called it. This was to test the Gemini capsule to see if it could land by a parachute. The next day landed the Gemini capsules in the ocean, but this was to test and land. And one of the test capsules is actually over our heads. They had to tear apart this building in July 2015, the roof, in order to get in here. I'm going to take the phone and show it to you. Plus, there's a Soyuz capsule just in front of us here, this little dining area inside the Space Center. So hang on a second. Don't get vertigo. Stick with me, folks. Here we go. All right. So that's the Gemini capsule there. You can see it. And they had to tear the roof down in here. And there's the Soyuz capsule, the back of it there. It looks like a thing you plug in your cigarette lighter to light a cigarette in the car.
That cigarette lighter bit was about 8 feet wide.
Yeah, it's at least maybe 10 meters. Yeah. And there's a shop over there. Here's the theater here. Lots of things to see.
More kids.
There you go. And it's quite a bit to see in here. Sorry, I don't mean to give you all vertigo. Let's bring it back over here. There we go. All right, so I hope that was at least interesting there. So yeah, so this is the second time Keith and I met. Now, he doesn't have the distinction for repeat visit being the first person, because actually I think Dylan might have been one of the first. Dylan Combert might have been the first for a repeat visit when I saw Dylan down in Cape Town. Dylan, I think Dylan was feeling left out because I didn't mention him the last couple streams. So
no.
There you go, Dylan. If you're watching, I did mention you. But yeah,
he's a frequent flyer then.
Oh yeah, Dylan is in every stream. He's it's like Hendo. He's always there, which we very much appreciate. So let me ask you this question, Keith. What was the most interesting thing that you saw here? Because we had displays about all the planets, the moons, like Europa, Ganymede, Io. Then a couple of examples of asteroids and the meteorites, that sort of thing. Was there anything really struck your fancy in the place?
I think a lot of it is just pulling ideas together in my head a little bit, because I've picked up what I've known over the last 40, 50 years, and so you just get that all refreshed in your mind. I think I haven't been in the planetarium for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, been a while.
Something like that. So to be back in a planetarium is quite an experience, because, as I say, it takes up your whole field of view. So there were some aspects of that where it's a kind of awe-inspiring feel to it. I was a little bit disappointed, perhaps as you were, that there weren't enough of those moments.
Yeah.
When you think of the, perhaps they can't transfer film shots into the planetarium experience so easily, but the different events that have happened, like launches,
and the New Horizons, SpaceX,
the Earth coming up over the moon's horizon, all sorts of things like that you think in a planetarium that would really look good.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when I first bought my camera that did a slight panoramic concept, where it would take 3 pictures and then stick them together. And I found that if I looked at a picture like that, I could feel that I was back where I took the photograph. So many times I'd take a photograph, get it home, have a look at it, show it to somebody else, and say, well, this doesn't really tell you what it was like, because you could see this and that, and it was a whole vista. And then the only thing that supersedes that now really is I use a 3D camera occasionally.
Yep.
Which is I haven't used it for a year or two, but that's a very interesting concept, because that uses a lenticular screen.
Yep.
So you don't need special glasses to view the image. So you look at what you want to take, and you're actually seeing it in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I've been trying to get my hands on a 3D laptop, which do exist.
Oh, do they? Okay.
But it's a bit like the televisions in this country.
Sorry,
I'm wrecking the table. Wrecking the table. That's just the tremors from the earthquake.
Yeah, there's an earthquake here in Leicester today. That's all these kids running around. Well, for me, it's lovely. It's nice, and I'd recommend it. You should bring kids here. Adults can come enjoy it. You'll learn a lot. It's a good experience. And, given today's price with inflation, it's not that bad to people trying to, photobomb our video broadcast there. It's not that bad a price. For adults, 19 quid. Kids, I think it's 12 or something like that. But the disappointing, everything, when you see things, they don't always...
There are pros and cons.
Right. So the thing that disappointed me is that in the field of astronomy and of physics and astrophysics, things change so rapidly that you really got to work to keep current.
Yeah.
This facility was opened in 1998. They've done some modification. We see 2015. We've got that Gemini tow vehicle that came in here. But there's no mention that I saw of the New Horizons mission to Pluto, which launched in 2006, and in 2015 got to Pluto. It's one of the most amazing scientific missions ever. There's no mention of the Cassini mission. And the Cassini was huge. It gave us so much more science and astronomy about the universe. There's barely a mention of the Hubble telescope. They do mention the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the newest thing out there, and that's nice.
Yeah.
That was also part of the film, narrated by David Tennant. But there's so much more they could do, and it wouldn't take a lot of space.
Yeah.
It's a little cubby hole, a little corner. And another reason to show you how dated some of the information is the info panels. Some of them are a little bit out of date. So, for instance, we were talking about how far have the Voyager missions gone, and it said like 18 billion kilometers. So I looked it up, and
that was what, 4 years ago?
Yeah. 3 years ago, one of them was already at 22 billion kilometers. The other was at 19 billion. So even the information I found on the internet was old compared to where it is today. and those things are traveling very fast. So it'd be nice to just do that. And for kids that get impressed by things, and even adults, it'd be really cool to talk about like the New Horizons. That spacecraft is the fastest traveling spacecraft that man has ever created, traveling at 38,500 miles per hour. And you think Formula One is fast? That's nothing. 38,400 miles per hour, miles, not kilometers, 58,000 kilometers an hour. So in the time we've been here, the New Horizons spacecraft has gone over 100,000 kilometers further into space, going out of our solar system towards the Oort cloud. It's unbelievable. It'd be nice if stuff like that was added. It doesn't take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, you're very correct. I mean, the interest factor is what you need to load in now, and I guess the presence of all the school children kind of allows them to do what they're doing. It's probably economy. It's probably keeping things they want rather than putting in things they are not sure they want.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it.
There can be some issues on where's the politics now.
No, I can't be bothered. What we just talked about, none of that's political. That's just science. And yeah, no, it's just they could do it. It's not that hard to do. But there is some nice tributes to the pioneers of space travel.
Yeah.
H.G. Wells, a little thing about him upstairs. Yeah. Robert Goddard, Wernher von Braun, the Russians who were involved in this, including the guy. I can't remember his name, who was thrown into, he was put into the Gulag in 1930. He was arrested for being, a saboteur. Of course he wasn't, just Stalin's paranoia. And then he was the father of the Russian space program, the chief engineer. They never mentioned his name because he was essentially like banned until after his death, and then they mentioned what his name was. So, yeah. But it's nice to see kind of a tribute to those who were early pioneers. And H.G. Wells, of course, because H.G. Wells, for instance, he inspired Robert Goddard, who was born 20 years after him. Well, I read his novels as a young kid.
Okay.
So War of the Worlds inspired Robert Goddard, the father of American, space travel. So it's kind of cool. Yep. Yeah. So it was coming over to Leicester today. It was kind of typical English weather. It was cloudy and overcast, and they said it was going to be nasty. But Keith and I walked outside to get the tripod to do this broadcast, and the sun came out. It's England, man. Turn the other direction and the weather will be nice.
Yeah, I think we might get away without umbrellas today.
Yeah, it looks like we'll be okay.
The only thing we might not need is the umbrella today.
Probably. So what are you up to these days, Keith? Do anything interesting since I last saw you?
Not a great deal. I've been struggling a bit with my health. I've got some new tests that I'm going to do in the next few weeks. To give a baseline, they're going to do a dynamic test on my breathing and stuff, because they can't get rid of, I've got a cough.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen me for last time I had a cough. Yeah. And I still can't shift it.
It's not the spicy cough because I didn't get it.
They can't diagnose it. Were
you ever a coal miner?
No, that's something that...
Were you ever a chimney sweep?
No, I didn't smoke.
Did you work in a stone quarry?
No, I didn't. None of that. Nothing where
I've run out of answers.
Nothing where I could pick up anything to do with the coal mine.
Did you remove asbestos from roofs?
No. Okay. I did take off asbestos tiles off my father's garage on one occasion, but fully aware of all the risks. I had a mask on. I was vacuuming as I went. Okay. And I was cleaning everything and putting it straight into plastic bags.
So it's none of that?
None of that, no.
Now Flushing, Flushing's down there in Oxford, the 15-minute town.
Oh, yeah.
And Flushing just asked, he said, isn't this where Prince Philip told a kid he was too fat to be an astronaut at this place?
Oh, I don't know about that. But,
well, if it is, they don't advertise it outside.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'll make a political comment now.
Yeah, good.
It was a very big shame that King Philip died before our beloved Queen Elizabeth II. Funnily enough, the Prince Consort never required that title of being a king.
No.
And I think we've moved somewhere in
our... Camilla's a queen.
Yeah, we've moved somewhere in our thinking on this kind of thing. And as a British person, I find these things a bit disconcerting. Because tradition and protocol and how you do things are very important.
Yep, no, I got you.
And when you're moving boundaries, you can read that in. I've always been a bit of an analyst, but I tended to look at the extremities of analysis. So you can keep whatever you like hidden from me, but I'll come in from some angle because I'm looking to find out what people's basic motives or basic beliefs are. And so when you're trying to analyse situations like that, shifts like that cause a mental.
Now, while I was waiting for you and the chap from rugby who asked me to meet someone in rugby, I never heard from him again. But while I was waiting outside, I wandered into the entrance just to make sure, because it's about 100 meters from where the entry is, the parking lot, and to the door. And I came to the door just to make sure I wasn't missing you. And I walked back out, and these elderly folks came by, and the gentleman I had met at the machine because you had to pay to park and the credit card didn't work. And anyway, so we chatted in the parking lot. But then when I left the building, he and his group were walking in, and he said, "Well, they boot you out already." I said, "Listen, something about they don't let Americans in the facility. You know, they can't let go of the grudge."
The secrets.
No. It's something. They said something about 1776, and I said some people just can't get over a grudge. You know, it's like when the king had his coronation. I was like, just another day. I don't. The royalty's not something I'm interested in. Although a lot of Americans are fascinated by it, but seriously, no. He said, "Did they boot you out?" I said, "No. They just." Bit of a grudge, no Americans allowed.
The other fun thing to find this, you must use your sat-nav.
Oh yeah, the signage is atrocious, that's for sure.
I might have made a mistake when I left the motorway.
I
might have done.
Possibly.
But I had to let Chris know I was going to be at least 20 minutes, ended up being 30 minutes late, because I drove around for 10 or 15 minutes and couldn't find any signs to the Space Center.
I followed the signs off the motorway, and then the signs, the GPS that's in the hire that I have, were telling me where to go. And when I first started, there were signs directing me north, and then south, and then east. And so like 3 or 4 roundabouts, and then the signs just disappeared. And it said follow the signs to this rocket symbol. But the rocket symbol just disappeared. I followed GPS, it brought me right to the place, but the signage is atrocious.
I think it's all the American tourists.
They stole the signs, yeah. They wanted souvenirs, so America's too cheap to buy stuff here in the shop, so they got the signs. Well, it's either us or the Nigerians that stole it.
Oh, did you hear the Nigerians are busy shredding their money?
Are they really? Because of this digital currency? Oh my gosh.
It's not really related to this. Perhaps you don't want to go down. They're going to see BDCs.
We'll save that for another day.
Save that another day. No.
My goodness.
Just interesting. All these different things are coming in. I don't know whether you're having the same experience. Put it down in the chat if you are. But every day there's some new mega bit of information that's going to vastly change our future. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, even if you watch the national and international news, almost all of it didn't have any effect on us.
Yeah.
And even if it did have an effect on us, it was something that wasn't really going to have a big impact for another 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it wasn't tomorrow, it was down the road. But today,
these days,
whatever happens in the news can affect you.
Yeah.
And what happens in Azerbaijan may affect you. What happens in Georgia or in Myanmar might affect you tomorrow. Yeah, and not just if you wear a uniform, but everybody in the street.
Everybody.
Some crazy nonsense could drive up the price. Well, an American ambassador could say that the Russians got weapons from the South Africans in Simonstown, and suddenly your vacation to America just became 20% more expensive. I don't mean to laugh at your misfortune. It's good news for me coming the other way, although I have a stack of rand that are getting worth less by the hour, so that's not good.
That was a big mistake. Anybody in South Africa next time, just ask Chris for his cash before he leaves.
Nah, you always got to have cash on hand when you land, but anyway. Well, we're going to wrap it up because we lost a bit of time with the travel snafu, and I'm going to get back on the road. But Keith, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for suggesting me coming here.
Seeing you. We must have a bit of a chat.
No, I enjoyed it. But the thing is, I've forgotten, because I was going to say initially that we go to the World Rugby Hall of Fame, but it closed. Because of COVID, they shut it down.
Well, it's not open since COVID. Oh, it's never going to open.
No, it was open. It's never going to open. It's gone permanently.
Yeah, there's a lot of places.
If you want to see the Rugby Hall of Fame, it's online. There's no physical location. It's kind of disturbing. One thing I'm frustrated about UK is that they put museums and places up and then they shut them down. Or places only open on a weekend. They're not open during the week. So there's a bunch of aviation museums. They only open on Saturday or Sunday. But I went to the Doctor Who Museum in Cardiff.
Okay.
During the 2015 World Cup.
Wales is the film set.
Yes,
for
the
a lot of Doctor Who.
Yeah, because it's on BBC films it down there. But they had it in Cardiff, and it was amazing. It was awesome. And I almost didn't go. I said, no, I'm going to go because I don't know when I'll get back to Cardiff. And I'm glad I went because they leased the facility, they didn't own it, and then it's shut down and it's gone.
That's gone as well.
Yeah. I mean, I understand this country. Things just come and go left and right. The only thing that keeps coming is immigrants. But museums open and shut down. It's crazy. So the World Rugby Hall of Fame is gone. It's only virtual now. You can look it up online. And the Doctor Who Museum in Cardiff is gone as well. Frustrating. So I went to the British Museum last week.
Doesn't close, does it?
No, but they're giving everything back. They're returning everything. So
there's nothing to look at now.
Exactly. So especially everything's going back to Africa. So before the Egyptology portion was gone, I had been to the British Museum a few times in the past, but my focus has always been on the Rosetta Stone. I wanted to see that, which is in that section, but I walked in, took pictures, read the panels, and walked back out and looked at other stuff. Because Egyptology didn't interest me that much, but I wanted to see it. So this time I made a concerted effort to go to Rosetta Stone, first stop, then Egyptology and the Assyrian things, saw that, got a lot of good photos and some videos. And then I wanted to see what they had for the Scandinavian Viking history. That was pretty lame. But I did see the Sutton Hoo helmet. Right. From the hoard that they recovered of the coins and the helmet and everything, and the reproduction of it is there. That was nice.
Probably a good museum up in York for the Vikings. I'm not sure.
Oh, I've been to that one several times.
Is that a better one?
Well, it's great for Vikings because I think you know the story. They actually were excavating to build a department store in the 1960s, and they found the remains of the original Viking Jorvik, which was the name for Jorvik. And they dug up and like, well, we can't. So they brought archaeologists in. They recovered the whole thing. They built a museum, a building on top of it, and you go down like an amusement ride where you ride around. And it's interesting because they put smells up. So like when you go by the middens, it smells like rubbish.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, when you go by the sewage, it smells like sewage. When you go by the cooking, it smells like cooking. And they're not that far apart as back in the time, you know. So hygiene wasn't a big priority back then. The understanding of medicine and science wasn't that strong. But it's pretty cool. So that's nice. It's better. And of course, I've also seen the Neolithic sites in the UK. I've been to, of course, Stonehenge a couple of times. Yeah. But then what's even more fascinating for me is to go to the Orkneys. In the Orkneys, you've got Maze Howe, you've got the Stones of Stennis, the Ring of Brodgar. I mean, look, I've been to them one time, and it's been over 2 decades ago, and those names are stuck in my head. Yeah. Then you also got Skara Brae. Skara Brae is amazing. What I find fascinating about the environmental wackos is that they talk about, you know, the change. Like I saw something online from British Heritage saying that they're trying to save these castles because the seas are rising and it's eroding the shorelines. The shorelines of the British Isles have been eroding and reforming for millions of years. Millions of years. That's the reality. In fact, there used to be a land bridge between here and France because, you know, the Ice Age, the big Ice Age sucked all the water up. So, a perfect example is this Skara Brae. Skara Brae was a part of the Orkneys that was in a relatively fertile area, and the seashore was hundreds of yards out. Well, it got covered because more land was formed from the sand blowing in, covered it up, built up, and was completely covered. Nobody knew it was there. And in the early part of the late 19th century, and the early part of the 20th century, it was first rediscovered when they're out there doing farming. And then they had a storm, a big storm, and it blew a bunch of sand. They're like, what are these stone things? And so they dug it up and they found Skara Brae. But of course, erosion's coming again, and it's eating away, so they had to put a seawall up there. But my point is that, you know, this is the nature of geology. The earth changes, land appears, land disappears, land reappears, and that's what's been happening forever. And I think Skara Brae is a good example of that. But the Orkneys are fantastic for Neolithic sites. And I think, for me, I love the Viking history of England and of the United Kingdom, but I also really like the Neolithic time. That's some really cool stuff. And you've got it in Ireland, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the burial sites are usually the only thing that's really visible.
Yeah, because they're usually mounds.
They have been able to find the position where post holes were for the wooden framed houses.
Gone, of course,
the wood's long gone, but because when that rotted out, it got filled with a different type of soil.
Right.
then you can actually detect. So a good archaeologist
And you can age that stuff.
then finds out, the age that it was, or what's underneath what's over the top of what. So we used to enjoy the series Time Team. I don't know whether you can view that on YouTube.
You can watch it in the States,
the States.
You can find it in the States,
South Africa.
Not on YouTube though, but like on
Amazon
Prime or something.
They are on YouTube. Yeah, so whether you can actually view them, that's the question. You might need a VPN, I don't know. I haven't really tried from South Africa myself. But they're always worth, I think, the hour that you find. Just as a one-off, if you don't know much about archaeology and how you find out different dates. It's much like the long story of what ships and when they were built and what the history of things are through the rings in trees.
Sure. Well, and also
one tree set of rings, if it comes from a similar area, that tree's ring pattern will mesh with one that started growing 10 years before that was chopped down. And then that one then will be 50, 100, 200, 300 years. And then you can match those rings for another one, and you find you can go back 1,000 or 2,000 years.
And there's other methods too. You've got radioisotopes, you've got ice cores, you've got pollen samples and cores. There's lots of ways to do it. In fact, for hominids, one way they date hominids, not just on the appearance of the skeletal structure and such, but also is from radioisotopes in the molars of the teeth and such, because at a certain time, in a certain place, that was the isotope. It's amazing how they can do these things scientifically. But back to Stonehenge before we wrap up. What's fascinating about Stonehenge is that they are still discovering that they have no idea what was going on there. They are finding in the past decade more sites that are part of the bigger Stonehenge complex, and they're huge, and they run out for miles in different directions, and it's really fascinating. So it's amazing what we've lost.
Yeah, wasn't that the same story in South America?
Oh yeah.
My understanding is that what they call the rainforest.
Oh, the rainforest, yeah. Oh, yeah, the rainforest. Central America, like where the Mayans were.
Yeah, the rainforest is actually an overgrown allotment.
Yeah, their plots have been overgrown. That's essentially
And they found that out because they could look at the sediment in the riverbed, and as they went down through the sediment, they eventually got to a layer where it was grassland of a certain seed type that was a grain that you would eat. And so it was actually a farmed area.
It's actually fascinating how they get things wrong. So, for instance, deforestation.
Yeah.
But much of Central America was deforested by the Mayans. They built a complex system of agriculture. They ripped all the trees out. They built all these things, and they did it over centuries. And now we're finding, and not just that way, the other way that's been a major impact in Latin America and Central America has been LIDAR.
Right.
The radar that looks down from above.
Or was it this high-flying plane?
It's a plane or a drone. You fly LIDAR. You and I can do LIDAR. It's not that expensive. You fly it over a spot, and it can image through the trees.
Yeah.
It gets the terrain underneath. And so LIDAR has been revealing Mayan cities that no one knows existed.
Yeah.
And if you look at the map where they keep appearing, they're very obviously geometrically linked at a certain distance.
Yeah.
Like in America,
it was a city plan.
It was planned, right? The whole region was planned. When the states were founded going west to the original 13 colonies, they would map out counties, and typically they were based on everybody had to be a day's ride from any corner in the county to the county seat.
Right.
And that's how they did it. And that's kind of, I don't know if that's the same concept.
That's a day city, not a 15-minute city.
Yeah, not a day city, not a 15-minute city. Anyway, we got to wrap up, folks. Thanks a lot. Be sure to give us a like.
Glad you all turned up.
Ask any questions you like, and leave any comments behind. It's been a pleasure seeing you again, Keith. Best of wishes on your health.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, folks.
May your trip go well.
Thank you very much. From the National Space Center in Leicester, y'all take care. Appreciate you tuning in.